Доброго здоров'я і слава Україні! Сьогоднішній свій брифінг я хочу
Good health and glory to Ukraine. I want to dedicate today's briefing to the important topic of our future and our preparations for it. Recently, in the public space, everyone could hear statements of various levels about the further course of the war and the liberation of Crimea. Do not take them only as statements. This is a real scenario for which we are already preparing as for the main one. The top political leadership of the state, our armed forces of Ukraine, the people are systematically working on this. At the same time, it is worth realizing that reaching the internationally recognized borders is only part of the way. As a state, we have to ensure law and order, humanitarian needs, proper management of the liberated territory and many other things. For this, the state apparatus, with all its elements and legal norms, must be ready. People who will implement it should be ready. After all, our citizens should know what to expect. That is why we have been working in a cross-government working group for a long time on behalf of the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, on the basis of the representative office. It includes members of other state bodies, non-governmental public organizations and experts. Its tasks are to develop the concept of urgent steps of the state in Crimea after its deoccupation. It can seem that nothing is complicated. Decide on priorities and act accordingly. But if you dive into the details, everything is much more complicated, especially within the framework of the state apparatus. A simple example, to ensure the management of the situation in the liberated territory, we should create at least a local military or military civilian administrations. Such administrations should work directly on the ground. Any management bodies are people who work in its staff, act in accordance with the law and implement certain tasks. However, it is quite logical that we will not be able to recruit the staff of such administrations from local residents who have lived under occupation for almost 9 years. It's not even a matter of trust of the people. In Crimea, there are definitely many of our citizens with a patriotic attitude whom the state can count and rely on. The issue is the level of readiness, knowledge of current legislation, ability to speak the state language, etc. And retraining is a long process, while management is needed immediately. As part of the expert work, we asked various state bodies about the number of positions that are necessary for full-time work in the relevant direction in Crimea and analyzed state statistics in 2013-2014. Conditionally speaking, the issue of personal reserves has been worked out. For example, according to the state Judicial administration, at the beginning of 2014, a total of about 2,000 people worked in the apparatuses of courts of various levels and jurisdictions in Crimea. This number provides an option for the administration of justice in Crimea in general understanding conditions. But we have to take into account that for 9 years, the occupation's so-called judicial structures in Crimea have considered more than 1 million civil and more than 100,000 criminal cases. Relevant decisions give rise to important issues of property rights, establishing the facts of the collection of alimony, establishing custody and care, executive proceedings, serving a sentence, and many others. We cannot pretend that nothing happened and start with a clean slate. We need to verify all of them, find out what they influenced, whether the rights of our citizens need protection from such decisions or anything, and where it is necessary to ensure the bringing of legal relations into the legal plane of Ukraine. This requires people, resources, and a regulatory framework. According to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, to ensure the performance of tasks, for example, the State Border Service requires about 5,000 military personnel, the National Police about 7,200 policemen, the State Emergency Service about 3,000 employees, and the National Guard 12,500 employees. The State Migration Service will need more than 300 employees. The Prosecutor's Office will additionally need about 550 employees, 300 for the State Bureau of Investigation. According to the data of the State Statistics Service, as of the beginning of 2014, in total more than 16,000 civil servants and 4,200 employees of local self-government bodies worked in Crimea. Only the given figures indicate the need for additional involvement of about 5–10,000 people, a significant part of which must be recruited precisely in the territory under the control of the Ukrainian government. Individual institutions of higher education, with the support of the representative office, have already developed and are undergoing departmental approval of an academic program program for training personnel to work in the deoccupied territory. In parallel, together with partner organizations, we developed a training course for civil servants on the issues of temporarily occupied Crimea and its reintegration measures. In fact, a whole direction of educational training is being created both for civil servants who already work in the relevant positions and for persons who are only planning to enter the civil service. We will inform you about details and other projects later as they are ready and launched. The next important issue is the issue of prosecution, amnesty and punishment. Our efforts are aimed at ensuring that the majority of our citizens who did not commit crimes during the occupation will not experience any injustice or discrimination after the restoration of Ukrainian power. At the same time, everyone who committed war crimes or crimes against humanity in Crimea, who carried out illegal persecution of activists, journalists or other citizens of our country for political reasons, who robbed residents, who took away their access to natural resources, who committed Russian propaganda or preparing children for service in the Russian army. We are primarily talking about the top officials of the occupation administrations who made management decisions and contributed to the establishment of the occupation regime. Amnesty or punishment measures should be applied to those who worked in occupation structures but did not make management decisions and did not commit other crimes. We are not going to send these people to prison, but the road to the authorities of Ukraine must be closed for them, obviously. Mechanisms are being developed to resolve the issue of citizenship, in particular regarding citizens of the Russian Federation who have illegally moved to the territory of Crimea and are in fact colonizers of this territory. The position is very clear. All Russian citizens who moved to Crimea must return to the territory of their own state. At the same time, each case is individual and international practices and guarantees of human rights must be applied in the relevant processes. For example, even before the beginning of the temporary occupation, about 15,000 citizens of Russia lived in Crimea on legal grounds. About 14.5 of them lived permanently. Since these people ended up in Crimea, legally we have to develop mechanisms to work with them as well. We are developing mechanisms for the protection and realization of property rights. Everyone whose property was taken or forcibly disposed of by the Russian occupiers should receive it back or be adequately compensated. For example, persons who were forced to get rid of land plots in connection with the decree of the President of Russia from March 20, 2020, which prohibited foreigners from owning land in Crimea. To foreigners, of course, they equated Ukrainians. In terms of humanitarian policy and demilitarization, we need to find approaches and neutralize the long-term influence of Russian propaganda. We have to level the influences and ensure that the truth is spread. Special attention should be paid to working with children whom the occupiers try to raise as patriots of Russia in kindergartens. In general, the purpose of this briefing is very simple and aimed at two audiences. The first is the citizens of Ukraine. You must clearly understand and realize that the state is determined to achieve its own plans and is preparing for the implementation. Just because some things are not reported, it doesn't mean that they are not there. It only means that they are not advertised so as not to harm the process. In the conditions of war, this is a normal practice. Be ready to help at the right time. The second is citizens of Russia who came to Crimea illegally. The time when you can freely and safely, albeit illegally, leave the Ukrainian peninsula is coming to an end. I think you should worry about finding a home in Russia if you do not have one and take your property away. Imagine what prices and demand will be when the Ukrainian army liberates Crimea. We have warned everyone. You still have some time. Thank you for your attention. Blue and yellow will already be in all corners of Crimea this year.
Синьо-жовтий вже цього року в усіх куточках Криму.